All right, I think I got recording started. So I added this topic about Ben stock PR. Does anyone else have any topic for Ambient today? Is my mic working? I couldn't hear anybody.
It's working. No one said anything.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's get to the topic then. So basically, Ben, I think there was a TLC meeting, which I think was in July. Well, we kind of discussed the wrapper chart. So not sure if everybody knows. I think they implement the wrapper chart for Ambient because some of our users in the community was complaining about installing Ambient is actually harder than is still like Sidecar because there were so many components you have to install one by one. So Ben implement the wrapper chart. There was some discussion in one of the TOC meeting, most recent TOC meeting about the wrapper charts. I don't know who was in that meeting, but I remember Mitch and John and Keith was in that meeting. And I think the general consensus for the wrapper chart is it's not something we want to recommend users to use in production because it's very prescriptive, but we do want to provide it as a sample and potentially for get started too. So so right now Ben has this PR, which I think Ben, if I read your PR correctly, it basically changes our installation of get started to use from Istio Cuddle to Helm using the wrapper chart.
So originally, I had changed the regular Helm install guide to have parallel tracks where you can install the chart separately, or you can install with the wrapper chart. And then when we wanted to move this to sample, when the talk said let's move this to samples, I think it came up of like maybe we instead put the wrapper chart because it's meant for tire kicking quick start into the quick start doc instead, so that we don't have like a parallel track in the regular install guide, which makes sense. But now we're thinking we don't want to put it in the getting started guide. So does it go back into the regular Helm install guide as like a parallel track? Do we have another entry point doc that's like, here's a third way to, like, that's the part where I'm confused about what we want to do.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying to have this discussion. So my personal preference is certainly I use the Istio Cuddle a lot for install, and I do think it is the easiest way to install. So, and also I'm when I was reviewing your PR yesterday, I was a little bit worried about I guess there's more contents and then there's less line that's removed and way more line added, which shows to me Helm installation for get started is a lot more for users to read than Istio Cuddle. So I definitely don't agree to remove existing Istio Cuddle for get started, which is also what we had for longest time for Ambient and also for the longest time for Sidecar. Now back to, I don't know if other people agree with that. I want to pause here to hear other people's opinion on Istio Cuddle for get started.
No, I agree.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as the wrapper chart, I do agree it's a lot simplified than running 5 Helm commands with 1 Helm commands. So I think we have a couple of options. So one option is in our get started guide, we can add a tab for Helm user. If they are interested in get started with Helm, they can basically go here and instead of download Istio Cuddle, they can just install, update their Helm charts and install using Helm. So maybe we can provide a tab there. So that's option 1. Option 2 is we don't want to clutter the page, right? Because the page is supposed to show you one thing to do, one option to do, get started, right? If we have two options, people might have to read and decide which is actual overhead. So option 2 would be maybe somewhere at the beginning and mention, hey, if you're a Helm user and prefer to get started using Helm, and then we provide a link to the wrapper charts and the usage of how to use the wrapper charts to install Istio Ambient. And then so they can click on that link to read the instruction if they choose to use Helm to get started. So those are the two options I could think of. I'm curious if you guys have other options or any other thoughts anybody have. All right. So I think Austin, you are first in the chat, so I'll let you go first.
No, I mean,
Ben and John.
nothing to add. I mean, I think it's probably a worse mistake than operator to have this simple. I mean, we have a simple mode. I completely agree with you. If someone wants a simple install, Istio Cattle install, it's perfect, works. And if this mode, I mean, it's better roll back the change add back operator. I mean, it's horrible. It's basically going back to Istio 1.0 and all the mistakes we made in the first release of Istio, which did exactly the same thing.
Okay, great. Thanks for that feedback. Ben, can you go next?
Yeah. One thing I disagree slightly that the Helm docs getting started are more complex. The only additional thing over the Istio control getting started in terms of a step is installing and setting up Helm as a prerequisite, which if you're already using Helm, you don't need to do that. And that's exactly analogous to installing Istio control, which we didn't include in the original get started. We just linked out. So I don't think the actual step count is significantly different, but leaving that aside, because that's a matter of opinion, and I don't necessarily want to get into that.
Yeah.
The only thing I have is if we are going to document Helm as an install mechanism, we have like it should we making everyone install the charts individually. The only option is A, not how people who are just trying it out quickly are going to want to do it, and B, it's unnecessarily complex. Like we are basically saying if we do that Helm is going to be more difficult than Istio control because we want it to be more difficult, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be for getting started. It doesn't have to be that difficult, but we've chosen to make it difficult because we want it to be. And that leads to friction where people come in and want to install with Helm. They're like, well, why would I install it with Helm? Because it's 5 steps, which is, it doesn't have to be 5 steps, but that's what we've chosen to do. So it's difficult, right? It's that sort of case of it's difficult because we've decided it should be difficult, not difficult because it has to be difficult. Like the quick start installation, whether it's Istio control or not, is not production best practice, right? It is quick start. I'm deploying it locally on my laptop in a cluster. That's what it's for. It's never been or intended to be production best practice to follow that guide and end up with an install that's like, production ready, upgradable, and all that. That's why we have a getting started and a regular install doc, presumably. That's why they're 2 separate things. And so if we put Helm in there at all, I would prefer it to be simple and not onerous.
Clarify, when you say if we put Helm there, do you mean get started or the Helm installation? I just want to make sure we understand your point because I think pages.
Wherever we put it, I want it to be the simplest possible way to install with Helm for that persona, right? And if the getting started persona is not production ready, I want to stand up a local cluster as quickly as possible, then if we document Helm there, it needs to be simple, the simplest possible way to do it. If we want to do the separate charts in the production ready install guide, that's fine. But I'm saying like we already do this with Istio control, right? We have quick Istio control install, but also here's another doc with the real way to do it. That's like production ready and recommended with all the other stuff. Like that's already a persona discussion. If that means that we have a getting started guy with 2, that bifurcates into getting started with Helm, getting started with Istio control, I'm okay with that. If that's what we want, I would have a slight preference for just having one way to do it in the getting started guide for the sake of not bifurcating. But we constantly have people coming in and saying, I want to do it quickly with Helm. What's the way? And then we don't really have an answer for them. So I guess I would be okay with the bifurcating the quick start personally, but I'll shut up and let other people talk.
Yeah, I feel like there is a just general quick start, which is I have no opinions and I want to use Istio. And that is not going to use Helm, I think, just based on historical context from users. Even before when we had a single chart, that they did not like Helm. Like we literally had users say, I was going to try Istio, but it had Helm, so I closed the page. Is it stupid? Yes. The quick start is not meant to appeal to engineers on this call that are smart and are well aware of Kubernetes. It's meant to be the dumbest way possible to get a demo environment. Like we had even had some conversations about having it automatically spin up a kind cluster with it, and they're like, it's legitimate demo usage. And then there's production side. It sounds like everyone here thinks production should be the split Helm charts. One of the other goals on the getting started that I feel pretty strongly about is that there should not be options. So there would not be two modes of getting started. We could maybe have another thing that's like I don't know, it's kind of an awkward middle state of like the quick start, but the Helm variety. One thing I see though is that oftentimes users aren't actually doing what we think they should do and managing these 5-ish separate charts individually, and they're actually just going and slamming them all together anyways. How I had envisioned it is that we have our demo mode that's totally unrelated from production. It's just purely demo environment. And then we have our serious doc, which is this. And it's like, this is the best way to do it. But then we also have examples of how you can do it. Like most people are not running Helm install from their CLI, right? They're plugging in these charts to Argo. Argo has other concepts that compose charts like application sets and whatnot. I'm not an Argo expert, so it's maybe slightly off. They may be plugging into Flux, which probably has its own concept. They maybe are using Helm file, which has its own grouping. They maybe are using a Helm parent chart. And I think it's perfectly fine for us to provide samples on how you can use these charts in various ways and say like, and we can provide a sample for a Helm parent chart. I would love to provide a sample for Argo too, but obviously we can just start with the one we already have. And if we feel it's not great for production usage, we can explain why. But it's kind of an orthogonal thing. It's more like, here's how you integrate Istio. Like, it's not really, I don't know. I don't know if this makes sense. And to be honest, even saying this, I don't know how I would go, like, where do I actually put this documentation? But in my mind, it's kind of orthogonal. Like, we have an install mechanism. Here it is. And then it's like, here's examples of how to integrate this with your CI/CD platform. That's my view, anyways.
All right, thank you. Michi, can you chime in, please?
Thanks. I think it's important to keep in mind our personas here. We're looking for someone who wants to kick the tires. And if we compare our two options of Istio Cuddle and the one Helm chart to rule them all, it's going to be a lot easier for most Kubernetes users to quick start using Helm. It's something they likely already have installed in their environments, and they're going to be hesitant to install on their command line a utility which they're not committed to actually using in production, being Istio Cuddle. So it does seem like this lowers the bar to getting started with Ambient. We heard from a lot of Ambient users who are kicking the tires that 5 Helm charts was too many, which indicates to me that they were not reaching for Istio Cuddle when they wanted their quick start demo. They expected to be able to do that from Helm. So I'm in favor of meeting those users where they're at. But again, by housing this under samples in OCI, we have a way of indicating to users like this is not your production ready install. And frankly, neither is the Istio Cuddle install that this page documented in the past. Does that make sense?
I think it does make sense, except for the part where you said that users don't want to install the Istio Cuddle CLI, because I feel like in our getting started, like we make use of the CLI for other purposes. It has usage outside of the install. But I tend to disagree there. Maybe like in my mind, what I see as the getting started, and maybe this is part of the problem, is it's like set up a test demo lab that's ephemeral to poke around and look at the pretty graphs. I don't think users see it that way, which is maybe part of the friction. But
Yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of a banner warning explaining like this is a demo version of Istio. It's great for KubeCon. It's not so great for your production cluster. As for the utilization of IstioCuddle for beyond install, that's something that we've wanted for many years to tone down, to make it so that you do not need an IstioCuddle instance to operate your cluster. But even if you do, most of those things, as far as I know, they're not really related to kicking the tires. Like config dumping a proxy, for instance, is very much an advanced debugging topic. Analyzer would be the only one that I would think of as potentially valuable for a demo.
I think on the getting started, they have the dashboard command to open up the visualization tools, which is ironically kind of the dumbest command. But also,
that is kind of helpful.
It is kind of helpful if you're a getting started kind of user. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. By the way, the old getting started used to just be a plain Kubernetes YAML that you did kubectl apply.
Oh, really?
We wanted to double down on it's a demo. Like there are ways to do that.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, could we make it even dumber and just say the requirement to try Istio is kubectl?
That's actually not bad because that means they don't have to download anything, not Helm, not IstioCuddle.
Funny is that you mentioned this because that's exactly what we had in Istio 1.0. We had the Helm charts and we had some code to automatically generate, since John said that he doesn't want too many options. That did exactly that. It did Helm template and created a single chart that only requires kubectl apply, and it worked. That was the first install. Actually, it was in 0.2, 0.3, I don't remember, 0.4 maybe, I think and it worked very well. I mean, it was very convenient for people, just kubectl apply and you got an Istio working without any problem. And I'm very happy to bring it back. It was very simple.
Do we have anyone who would be interested to explore that though?
I think my hesitation there, like it sounds like a good idea, but at the same time, this is at least the fourth meeting where we've discussed this topic and come to a conclusion. We've sent Ben off on several what are looking like wild goose chases at this point. At some point, we do need to be able to merge code and get a change integrated.
We did merge the code already in Istio 1.0. I mean, then we removed it, and now we are going back to what we decided it's not good. I mean, we spent a year moving from the combined Helm chart and trying to move people away and migrate people away from that, and it was a nightmare because it's very difficult to move from the single chart install to regular Helm.
Do you remember why we removed it? Honestly, I don't remember.
Operations, because it was very, very hard to operate. You couldn't safely upgrade. You couldn't safely anything
because at that time it was the only install mechanism that we documented.
Right. Okay,
so it's very different circumstance today.
Yeah.
I wrote up a blog post about why the install is the way it is. Maybe it'd be useful to publish at least share it in the contributor Slack. Although other people may have a different view of the history, so it's really my view of why things are the way they are.
I mean,
yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, I don't think any of us dispute that it's the history is what it is, and you have to deal with the history that you've got, right? I get that. I just would like to get to an end goal where we don't struggle with Helm, especially since our competitors and other service meshes don't seem to struggle with it quite as much as we do. So that's kind of what I'm trying to press on, is I would like this to be unsurprising for people that have never used Istio and already use Helm. And that's not currently the case. And I want to figure out why that is the case and fix those things so that we don't have that. That's my only thing.
Yeah, if we look at the charts, there's base. Almost everyone has CRD split out, including Linkerd, as we see here from install. So base is not going away, right? Or we could, maybe it could, but for the most part, Helm does not do CRD as well. So it's split out. There's Istio, that is the core. So we have to have at least one chart. So we'll say that's there. Now there's ztunnel and CNI. Do we want to bundle those with Istio-D? I don't know. That seems a bit odd to me. Others do it. Cilium does it. For example, I think they just have one Helm chart and they have a operator and daemon set. But there's pretty legitimate reasons to keep them separate, especially the fact that one of them has revisions and one doesn't.
Right.
Do we need CNI and Z-tunnel to be two separate charts? Maybe not.
Definitely not.
Like the flexibility to be able to, sure, maybe. But we could have, a mini parent Helm chart that's just the two of them. Gateway, I feel like, is kind of irrelevant / is useful to be separate because you're not installing one gateway. A gateway is a construct that you install many times. We have this false notion that there's one ingress gateway and one egress gateway. We should be getting away from that. And if people don't like it, Kubernetes gateway doesn't use Helm anyways. So I feel like we have, at the very minimum, two charts. And unless someone wants to put Istio-D and CNI and Z-tunnel together, which seems problematic operationally, given our stance that Istio-D has revisions and we're splitting the control plane and the data plane, like all we can really do is then merge the Z-tunnel and CNI, right? And so does that merge actually provide meaningful value? Maybe it does. But is it going to go change the user's perception of Istio that they had to install one daemon set instead of two? Like, do we want to do that? Does anyone here care about solving that problem?
I think merging CNI and Z-tunnel and maybe putting the CRDs in that chart is not a bad idea. I think it, and then you have two charts basically. You have Istio-D and you have the data plane. I mean, 5 is one thing. There are 4 actually today, but
well, I think 5 includes the gateway, so which I think
gateway. I think we agree that it should never be part of the same thing.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like I agree, but if you go through our docs, I think it says install these 5 charts. So is that silly? Yes.
I do sort of agree. I do sort of agree that I would like, in the pie in the sky sort of way, to get to a point where we have maybe 2 charts: Istio control plane, Istio data plane, and like we have an upgrade story where you can. That is the only bifurcation you need for safe upgrades. I don't think we're there yet, but like that's like the end goal. That would be ideal, I think.
Yeah, but where does CRDs go? That's
CRDs are a royal pain to deal with, no matter where you are, which is one reason why Helm doesn't touch them. And that's mostly a Kubernetes problem, but
well, we need to have an opinion, right? So is the
right? We have to deal with it, right?
Like I think there's largely 2 viable paths. We can do something about base so that it's gone, and we can merge CNI and Z-tunnel. I think for legitimate production usage, there's not much appetite for recommending the merging of the control plane and the data plane, at least from my custom's view. I don't know that anyone else is opined on that.
So, by the way, I've been looking at Linkerd get started. So nobody complained Linkerd was very hard to install, and their get started was using Linkerd CLI, which convinced me Istio is good enough. We probably don't need to go back to kubectl apply. And the value also is you can do this check command, right? Which we also have similar. I think I went to Cilium the other day, and they were also using their CLI to install get started. So I think get started Istio is good enough. It's kind of the standard across the service mesh industry, and nobody complained Linkerd or Cilium was hard to install. As far as the Helm stuff, I think I agree. It would be nice to consolidate, but we will still have at least 3, right? At the minimum, we'll have gateway. We're going to have Istio-D, and maybe the rest we could potentially combine into 1. So we still have 3. So right now we have 5. How big is the perception change when you consolidate from 5 to 3?
Well, there's really 4 is what we're saying, is that 5 should not be there.
Which one shouldn't be there? It's the
Ingress gateway is not really a part of the install.
Oh, yeah, because you could using the new way to just deploy and use the controller to deploy a gateway.
Well, it's not even that necessarily. It's like even if you're using Helm to install it, it's not like you go and I want to install Istio and you go and like you should. It's separate. It's like you don't install a sidecar in the install of Istio, right? An ingress is you don't a better example. You don't apply a waypoint in the install Istio step, right? Like that's a using Istio step.
Okay, gotcha.
So even if you just because I feel like we naturally grouped it. Oh, here's how you install with Helm. So here's the steps you need to follow. You can install a gateway with Helm. Therefore, it's part of it, but it's not really. Like we could provide a Helm chart that's like a canary virtual service and destination rule setup or something. That's not part of the install, even though it happens to use Helm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's not that it's invalid to be here, but I think there is 4 charts required for Istio, and we happen to put a 5th one. That's
Okay, so if we remove the ingress, and if we consolidate ztunnel, CNI, and base potentially into one, that gives us 2 instead of 4. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm not convinced about base. Like ztunnel and CNI, there's no technical reason why they shouldn't work. But base is we need a lot of consideration there. There's all sorts of weird things in base.
That's really just a CRDs, John. And now that they're V1 and they don't change that often, it's no longer that. And we are better with backward compatibility, which is one of the reasons we had base separated. I don't think base is so.
I don't think it's so hard, but let's actually go make sure that you can do it and it makes sense. Because there's things like some services, some service accounts, endpoints. Like there's all sorts of crap like that probably shouldn't be there, but it also probably isn't going into the ztunnel CNI chart. It's probably going into the East2D chart. Maybe.
Revision. I mean, base must be in not revision.
Well, that's the thing is you have to install the CRDs before you install Istio, and then you have to install Istio before. Yeah, I mean you don't have to technically, but it kind of is weird to install the CRD separate. I don't know. I just want to make sure we actually are making a plan there and thinking through edge cases. It's not just fold them in together. Whereas ctunnel and Z9, that's really I don't expect any issues there. And one other thing too with sidecars, you might not use CNI or ztunnel at all. And so then what is base? We just need to make sure we think out all these cases. Or we can say that sidecars are, this only applies to ambient. I don't know. There's just.
So
yeah,
Ben,
primarily focused on ambient for the Helm stuff, since I think we have more leg room to do it correctly there than we do with Psycho. Sorry, go.
No problem. I think my network speed are very bad. So I was going to ask you for the repo chats, what is your motivation to create the repo chat? Is it because people complained the 5 install was too complex?
It's because they complained that 5 is too many, which I agree. And the wrapper chart, for what it's worth, is 5 lines of YAML. So it's almost not worth arguing about. It's so small.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
So I think I like what we decided in the TOC meeting. If you guys all agree, it's the wrapper charts as an example to show people if they want to consolidate some of the charts, they are welcome to do so. Here is an example to show them how to do it. And if we want to combine any of the Istio components, that's a much longer discussion. We have to discuss because we have to think through sidecar, we have to think through the sequence of the components install. So I don't know if we'd be willing to take on that challenging at the moment. I think we may have more urgent stuff to do. But having your wrapper chart as an example would be good. So now the question is, do we want to link it from anywhere in the doc? If so, well.
If we aren't going to funnel people into it, as an entry point so that we can basically exert, like the big problem with our charts is people don't use them very much. Developers don't use them because they prefer Istio control because they're already Istio users. We've traditionally preferred Istio control. The Helm charts, because they don't get a lot of constant attention, are not they have rough edges because of that. So if we are not going to like use the wrapper chart and use the Helm charts as like a primary entry point so we can get feedback and fix them and have the nice feedback loop of, I use this, it doesn't work the way I expect, can you fix it? We fix it, it gets better. If we're not going to do that, I'd rather just not document the wrapper chart at all. Because I feel like the only value is in like inducing people to use the charts so that we get good feedback on how to make the charts better. And if we're not doing that part, I almost don't want it in the docs because then it becomes yet another way you could do it. I'd rather just link people to the GitHub folder if they ask, and then we call it a day and have it undocumented. Or if we don't want to have something that's undocumented, just delete it. That's also fine too. Costin, I will say that some prod users don't use Helm like that. Again, depending on your local topology, you may just install everything in one go and recreate clusters when you upgrade. It depends. Like, that's the problem with any opinionated install. Some users do it like that and some don't. So we have to support all of
We
that.
should not optimize for this use case. We should optimize for the use case where people have a cluster or have replica sets and things that they cannot just throw away clusters. And it's more common for people to upgrade the components than to throw away the entire cluster because you want to upgrade Istio.
I am interested in having the simplest possible setup and getting started that could be done in the shortest amount of time for all the install mechanisms we support. And if we have an install mechanism where we don't support the quickest path for it, I would question why we have it, right? Like if we support that install mechanism, the quick start we document for that mechanism should be the simplest possible thing from the user's perspective, or I don't know why we do it.
And we have the Helm, by the way, we still have an operator somewhere in Contrib, no? That's also one step that can be done if someone really wants a single step installed. But Istio Cattle is a requirement for any user who's actually, getting started without Istio Cattle, to do PS, PC, debug, validate another thing.
That's valid. Yeah. It's useful for introspecting after you've installed regardless. So that is certainly an argument for making it be the way we want people to install things. Okay.
Another comment is that we changed the install so many times. I mean, we have Istio Cattle, at least it's stable. It's been that way for 2 or 3 years, and let's not churn again.
All right, so sounds like, Ben, you propose just give people the example when they ask. Let's not link to the doc for now. And if there's enough attention, that bothers you or somebody else, maybe we start adding it to the doc. That sounds a reasonable approach for now?
Yeah, or if the wrapper chart, it is only 5 lines, but it's outside of the docs, it isn't tested at all, right? The idea was that we could have a doc test that does it. So if it becomes a maintenance burden, then I would probably just drop it, right? Again, maybe the answer is just to drop it or put it in a samples repo if we have one or something. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can have it in the samples directory. So if people ask, just give it to them. And then depends on the interest. If there's a lot of people ask, then we'll reconsider our decision.
And then the other go along with that is we're currently publishing that wrapper chart to our Helm OCI repos. If it is just a sample, I'm guessing we don't want to do that, right? We want to have it just be sitting in the Git repo and that's it, no publish, correct? Because if we're not going to document it, I don't know if we should publish it, right? That's the thing. So I would be inclined to take it out of that too, if we're not going to document it. Does anybody disagree with that?
So if we don't publish it, can they still use the sample?
They cannot use it with a direct Helm. They can't add the Istio repo via Helm the way they do with the other stuff and then Helm install wrapper chart. They would have to download it and point at it as a tarball and point at it locally.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a little bit harder for them to use, basically.
Yes.
I remember people were asking about publishing the charts the other day. Is that true? I remember on Ambient.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a little hard to use if we don't publish it, but also if we're not going to exercise it or funnel people into it, I don't know if I want to publish it because nothing's checking that it's going to work in 5 years or 2 years or 1 year or 6 months. That's the thing. I don't want to publish artifacts we're not exercising, is what I'm saying.
One comment. I mean, if we wanted to exercise document and everything, I would be okay if we get rid of istio install. But my concern is having both, two ways to easy install, one with the repo chart, one way with istio and expecting people to choose between one, what do we recommend and all the other stuff, plus Helm individual charts, which you cannot easily afford. It's too much.
I think that there has been some talk, which I would agree with, around making istio control install be a pure Helm install wrapper. So it just does that. And then then it starts to fall into place a lot more, right? Where you can say the quick start is istio control install, which is just doing Helm install, the same as the wrapper chart would do. And that's it. And then if you want, I think John has a PR out to say, like, maybe we can use istio control to do, again, what Helm would already do and just template that all into a YAML if you want to do something. Like, that's an option as well. Right now, istio control is not a strict wrapper around Helm install, and it doesn't actually even template in exactly the same way Helm does in all cases. But I think we can fix all that by just removing most of the bespoke install stuff and wrapping Helm install with that, which then probably makes the quick start a bit easier. I mean, if you still absolutely already have Helm and don't want to download istio control, it doesn't solve it, but at least it gets us closer to a unified approach.
But how would that impact a user in any way? Like, how do I know we're under the cover using Helm install when I photo to get started? I mean, if it's not impacting the user, why would we spend the effort to do it?
Because just to avoid doing, because we basically, istio control does a lot of what Helm does already. And so the question is, do we want to redo what Helm is already doing in a way that's more bespoke and specific to this project than what people who are already using Helm would expect, right? In an ideal world, you would istio control install and it would generate a Helm release, which you could then pick up with your regular Helm tools and use without istio control, just like you would if you had installed it with Helm. It would be no different. We can't do that now because we're not anywhere close to that, but like that would be like the end goal of, I can istio control install and it creates a Helm release, which I can then pick up seamlessly and manage with Helm as if I hadn't even used istio control. Like that would be ideal, but we're not there yet.
So to add one more use case to what you said earlier, I mean, it would make migration from easy install to easy operate much easier, because if istio just did Helm install, then the second day user could go and do Helm upgrade, Helm,
Sure.
And start using that and stuff. So it's not a bad, it's an excellent idea, I think, because then we have a smooth transition between easy install, easy operate, and that I'm 100% against.
Okay, yeah. If that's the end goal, and I agree, if that's the end goal, then I feel better about it. We still will basically direct people who want to start with Helm to the more complex instructions. But if we get that down to 2 charts, it's better. And if istio control is the quick start and it emits completely compliant Helm installs that are no different, then that is a much better place to be. So I'm okay with that. Yeah.
And Mitch, I think you had your hand for a while.
I'll just reiterate, we already talked about this in the TOC meeting, documented a decision to execute on. It sounds like we're arriving at consensus in this meeting, and that's nice, but as a community, we really need to be able to make a decision and execute on it without reconsidering it every week. And I don't have any confidence that what we're talking about here, this new consensus, is somehow better than the old consensus and will have staying power. I expect we'll talk about it again next week. If we can find some way of documenting our decisions when we make them, and then when they're raised in decisions like this, we can say, this has been asked and answered, we've considered it, and here's what we're doing, at least so that we don't reconsider more than once a month. I think that would be really good for the community.
Okay, let's focus the next few minutes to wrap up and give a summary. So to Mitch's point, so what I heard, we have consensus, please correct me if I'm wrong, is for get started, we're going to continue use Istio for now, and that's the only way we're going to show people how to install Istio. For the Helm wrapper charts, we're going to have it in somewhere in our sample. And when user ask for it, we make it available. Ben, I think you were okay with not publishing the charts. But if the charts are already published, I personally feel we can make a decision based on data. We don't have to pull them out. But I don't know if we have any consensus on that. And then what else do we have consensus? I think we showed interest to longer term to maybe consolidate some of our charts. So we don't have 4 or 5 charts. But that needs a concrete plan before it put in place or anything. And I think most recently, Carsten, you and Ben were discussing, can we switch Istio to use Helm? So that also needs a concrete plan. I don't think we decided anything on that. Is that a fair summary, Mitch or anybody else?
I mean, it's not a change in UX documentation or anything. It's just an implementation change that, Istio implementation instead of doing Helm template or use Istio install. It seems pretty straightforward and simple and doesn't require too much more than a PR review. No, there's no.
Yeah, it shouldn't ideally it shouldn't change the quick start that we already have, right? You would do the same thing. Like the what is spit out in the cluster might look a little different, but it wouldn't affect the documentation, or it shouldn't ideally.
Well, it would so basically instead of telling that after quick start we need to delete everything and start with Helm, the new doc will say that hey, you quick
Right.
start.
Yeah. And that would be better in that regard. That's correct. Yeah.
All right. I think we need people to write some doc and ask the rest of the leads for approval before we do that. Let me just say, right? We don't have consensus. We have to move to use Helm under the cover for Istio. Well, thanks for whoever taking the notes. I agree. Based on our recap on these. Decision reduce the number of chats, but needs a proposal. I don't think we have a decision to drive that yet. All right. Any other topic we should be discussing, or is there anything more on this topic we should be discussing? All right, thanks so much for joining. Give you guys 12 minutes back. Thanks, bye.